Very own Adeline. Thank you, Adeline.
Thank you, Raz, and hello, everybody. I'm Adeline. I'm a fellow chartered accountant and a Microsoft D365 Business Central Solution Architect. Working for Microsoft in the GPS business unit, I support Microsoft partners to achieve growth in Business Central and the wider Microsoft Dynamics Business Application Suite. I support them with structured onboarding, technical engagement, technical consultations, and also with Microsoft certifications. Right, so the agenda today. I will be presenting Business Central Finance to accountants. So the assumption is that you guys have some sort of accounting background or a slight understanding of debits and credits anyway, and balance sheet and income statement. It will go through a quick introduction, principles on accounting and Business Central setup on posting groups and posting setups. And we'll look at an example. I'll demonstrate an example, followed by VAT interactions with journals in Business Central and any questions and answers. Okay. Right. The session provides an overview of setting up postings to subledgers and main ledgers that underpins Business Central transaction postings. Okay. So, subledgers. Subledgers, also known as memorandum ledger, also known as day books. These are detailed transactions, entries that helps business analyze their operations in detail. The general ledger is a summarized view of these transactions posted to nominal accounts. These nominals, also known as GL accounts, in Business Central form the balance sheet and the profit and loss financial statements that are then submitted to tax authorities at the financial year end. Now, Luca Pacioli was an Italian who invented accounting, right, and the double entry bookkeeping system. And BC is based on his principles. If we are in the dark ages and only rely on pen and paper, the basic premise of accounting is then daily entries are recorded in different books, such as cash book, customer books, supplier books. And then at certain intervals, such as month end, the totals of these entries are then manually debited and credited to the nominal accounts in another book called the General Ledger. In Business Central, this is known as Chart of Accounts. Now, Business Central has taken these principles and concepts, but instead of an accountant having to manually transfer the totals, Business Central creates a bridge, where when you record and post transactions into these subledgers, the bridge will automatically post to the nominal account of your choice. So this means that the subledger totals should always reconcile to the GL accounts in the chart of accounts, because we're using this bridge. Okay. I said should reconcile earlier. This is only true if this rule is adhered to. Never post a transaction through a GL account directly if it should go through a subledger. This is a very key rule. Okay. Many finance users with lack of knowledge and understanding has made the mistake of posting transactions directly to a GL account instead of posting through the subledger. This happens when the GL account has that default setting for direct posting enabled, and I will show you in a minute. Now, this has a negative effect of transactions being in the GL account and no transactions showing in the subledger. 99% of the time when I get a support call from my customer saying, my totals do not reconcile with my GL account from my customers, right? The first thing I do is to check the GL account for direct posting. At its heart, Business Central is a finance system, okay? However, Business Central is really strong with operations, especially on the inventory side. BC can do wonderful things like tracking, allocating goods, automating the whole warehousing and logistics movement of goods. And I've implemented for customers where they just want Business Central for the inventory side only, because they might have an existing finance system already. That is fine. However, the finance setup in Business Central is still required, even if it is a case of setting up a very simplistic finance solution. Okay. So for each posting nominal account, right, or GL account, as we know it in Business Central, first of all, remember to uncheck the direct posting fields for all the accounts, that are set up in the posting groups and posting setup. So when you're in the chart of accounts, the beauty of Business Central from a general ledger view is that there's this lovely option to sum up sections of your balance sheet and income statement. This makes analysis and reporting work a lot more user-friendly. You do not have to print out a trial balance and then having to investigate further by going to the subledgers. You can get all the transactions posted in subledgers from each GL account in Business Central. You can also ensure general ledger accounts are set up in sections that allow finance users to add GL accounts to each section without having to amend the totaling in BC. See how I have set up my chart of accounts up here, where you can add new GL accounts in between. This means the chart of account will be beautifully maintained. I have seen some really messy accounts in the past where some balance sheet accounts are then lumped in between P&L accounts because they've run out of numbers, So I like how, when I'm managing for implementing for customers, I then do this sort of nice mapping and totalings for them. Okay. Right. Remember I said earlier that Business Central created a bridge between subledgers and general ledger. This bridge is known as the posting groups and the posting setup. Okay. So I should go back a little bit. So give you a bit of time. So we have general posting groups. General business posting groups are assigned to the customers and vendors. Suppliers are known as vendors in Business Central. General product posting group are assigned to items and resources. Stock or products or goods are known as items, by the way. Okay, resources could be machine or people. And then you have the general posting setup. This is the bridge, that with these two combination, you decide which accounts, which nominal accounts they should go to. So here's an example of I've set up a simple general business posting group and general product posting group. Yeah, so this is to the customer and vendor. This is to the items. Yeah, I've only set it up for items. Then here you decide on the GL accounts from the chart of accounts. This bridge I mentioned earlier. Okay. I will explain the closing stock concept in a minute. Okay, because this is where there's like COGS, all these other accounts come into play here. Okay. Now, VAT is also a subledger in Business Central. Same concept with general posting setup. Okay. So the VAT business posting group to the customers and vendors, the VAT product to items and resources. But this time, the addition, besides the accounts that's mapping to, it also calculates the VAT for you. Notice here I've set up like domestic standard. Here it's calculating 20%. By the way, for those of you who are overseas, I'm in the UK, so I'm demonstrating the UK localized version. Okay. Whereas, and in the UK, when we have customers or vendors that are outside of UK, even if it's a standard VAT, it's a 0. So I've set up where any items with standard, when it's at domestic, it will be 20% calculation, but for any foreign, it will be 0 calculation. So Business Central, you can set lots and lots of these different posting setup and do different calculations as you see fit. Right. Now we're looking at the customer posting group. This is you decide on the accounts receivables, right? You can create lots of different categories of customer groups as you like. And the great thing is this, you can categorize your customers to death with the customer posting groups, but you can give different debtors GL account or same account or a combination. So as you can see, I've created like a category for marketplace and trade with the same accounts, but for my intercompany and maybe other, I've put it to different accounts receivables account. Okay. So I've created a customer named Jane Doe, all right? And I've assigned this. I say it's a general business posting group of B2C, domestic, and then the customer posting group of other, which we saw earlier will go to 35100, which is the accounts receivables in balance sheet. Okay. Don't worry, I'll do a demo in a minute and you can see all this in a minute. Same principles with the vendor or supplier, same concept. Yeah. All right. You can have different categories. It can all go to the different accounts or same accounts or a combination. Okay. So here I have set up a supplier called Microsoft with all these posting groups. And it will post to 54100 for the accounts payables. Bank accounts is also a subledger. All right. Again, same concept as customer and vendor posting group. You can create lots of different bank accounts and assign it to same GL account or separate GL accounts. Okay. let's talk about closing stock principles. Right. For most accountants, we do not account for closing stock until the year end. Yeah. Okay. Businesses have to do like a physical stock take at year end and then advise their finance of the value for closing stock. Finance department then manually post a journal where you debit closing stock in the balance sheet and credit closing stock in the P&L. This is a manual process, yeah. However, in Business Central, we don't do any of that. Business Central is a real-time inventory system. That means this year-end process, manual process that I am talking about for other accountants in other systems, that is redundant in Business Central. Business Central will post your closing stock entry with every transaction involving stock. Okay. So let's look at this. In the inventory posting setup, right? This is the balance sheet closing stock account. All right. The interim account. So here, this is where with the closing stock, what you're saying is that whenever I have stock and I'm posting it, right, then in and out, I will update the closing stock with this. You know, if it is goods in, it will debit this balance sheet and credit the P&L side, which I'll show you in a minute. And if it is goods going out, then it will credit this balance sheet account and debit the P&L account, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. Now, then you're going to ask me, what is this interim? The interim account is actually an accruals account for GRNI, or some of you know as goods received. But actually, this is for goods received or shipped, but not yet invoiced. So you see, you do not even need to do any accruals work for closing stock. It is all done for you in Business Central. On the P&L side, we go back to the general posting setup, okay? And can you see these columns, the COGS account and the direct cost supply account? So let me just. So when you debit or credit the balance sheet, the opposite side has to go to a closing stock in P&L. Now, you notice I have actually put it to the same accounts because for accountants, right, closing stock is closing stock. I don't have to put it to different accounts. However, you can if you want. So on the balance sheet side, with the inventory setup, any in and out of stock will go to the inventory account, right? But on the opposite side in the P&L, it looks at this. COGS means goods going out, i.e. from the sales side for closing stock, okay? And then the direct cost supply, this is for inbound goods coming in. So where you debit the balance sheet, you would credit this account here. And for the COGS, where you credit the balance sheet, it will debit the COGS account, okay? And as you can see, I put it to the same account because this is just closing stock. And remember, in the past, as accountants, we're used to not understanding this concept because we're like, oh, year end, we'll just do a manual journal. In Business Central, you don't do that anymore. It's a real time doing your closing stock for you. Okay, and of course, I talked about the interim side. So these two columns will do the interim side for you. What about the inventory adjustment account? Okay. The inventory adjustment account is for when there are manual inventory adjustment using item journals. Okay. So if you're using any kind of manual journals involving stock, i.e. not through sales or purchases, yeah, okay, you're using sort of item journals, physical inventory item journals, all those sorts of inventory journals, then the double entry will be the inventory account from the inventory posting setup, and this account here in the inventory adjustment account, right? Of course, you can have different accounts if you want, all right? But then, you know, if you're going to do that, that helps with, possibly help with analysis. But for me, I don't. I just tend to put it all into one account, and then I'll use dimensions to classify if I want, yeah, or you can use different accounts. Typically, this is the inventory adjustment account is probably the only account that I would use, I might possibly use a different account for, because then that gives me slightly a better understanding of what is adjusted manually for stock rather than through sales and purchases. Okay. Right. So here I have created an item, right, where I've put the inventory posting group, okay, and as you seen earlier with the general business and the general product, the combination, it will work out the sales, the purchases, and the P&L side of the closing stock. Same with the VAT product. In combination with the VAT business, it will then work out the VAT percentage and the VAT accounts. Okay. So let's look at an example. Say, for example, I know I put 1st of June, but say today, the business purchased 100 pieces of stock from vendor X. Each piece costs £1. So total purchases will be 100 and 100 for purchases and 20 for VAT. Okay. So in terms of the accounting transaction, it will be debit purchases, which is taken from the general posting setup, debit VAT, which is taken from the VAT posting setup, and credit accounts payables, which will be taken from the vendor posting group. Okay. Now let's talk about the closing stock account. What will happen here is it will debit the stock account in the inventory posting setup on the balance sheet, and it will credit the direct cost account or closing stock account actually, which is direct cost applied in the general posting setup. Okay. Remember, do not use journals. All right, we are going to use the documents instead. Okay. I'll walk you through these examples after the end of this slide. Okay, so say further down the line, the business sells 20 pieces of this stock to customer A on credit, yeah, and you're selling them for £10 each. So, sorry, go back. You have total sales of £240 VAT. Okay. So in terms of the accounting, we're looking at debit accounts receivables, 240, the gross amount. Credit the sales net, credit VAT, 40. On the closing stock, we're looking at credit the stock account because there's only 20 you sold, yeah, at £1 each. And remember, closing stock is net of cost or lower of cost and net realizable value. So it's also for Business Central, we'll be looking at costs, yeah. unless you adjust to lower of the cost. So it will be credit the balance sheet, yeah, and then it will debit the, sorry, it shouldn't be direct cost, it should be cost of goods sold account, my bad, but it will be the same, it will be the closing stock from the general posting setup, my bad, there should be cost of goods sold, the COGS account, okay. And then what will happen is that there should be 80 units remaining in your item. Okay. Now let's then talk about the bank side. You received the money, yeah, and you've also paid the vendor. Okay. So then I will walk you through how it works on the bank side as well. Okay. So you would debit the accounts payable from the vendor posting group, and you would credit bank, which will be from the bank posting group. Yeah. And then, of course, with the other side, money coming in, debit the bank, 240 from the bank posting group, and then the accounts receivables of the customer posting group. Okay. Well, I put here, do not use journals. We are going to use journals, all right, on this side, but I'll show you, what I'm trying to say here is you do not use GL accounts, rather, at this stage, okay? So let's do a walkthrough now. I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see my screen? So here I have Jane Doe. I showed you, I've set up Jane Doe, okay? And I've set up the vendors. Okay. As per what I have shown you, okay. Now, and I've shown you what on the slides, how I've set up my posting setup. So if we go to general posting setup, here. Now, how I've done this in the past, right, to make it kind of more understandable for some customers, I can do it where I'll say, right, this is just for customers. So, sorry, rather, this is just for suppliers, and suppliers, I will fill in only the purchaser side. And as you can see, for the customers, I'll only fill in the sales side. Yeah. Okay. So I've done these to kind of showcase how you could set up certain things. You can also set up an item as a service rather than inventory, so that it will always post to the accounts instead of using GL accounts. In BC, you can actually forget about using GL accounts and create everything through posting setups if you want. So as you can see, so think of this general posting setup as your P&L side, yeah? Generally, most of the columns are P&L side. And then the rest are balance sheet. So for example, inventory posting setup, right? These will be the balance sheet, the customer posting group, the vendor, the bank account posting group. They're all balance sheet accounts, okay? So if I create that purchase order, like I said to you, I should give the example of, and here I have, like Blue Peter Fashion, I have created one purchase order earlier, all right, and as you can see, very cheap. I bought from Microsoft laptop of 100 laptops for £1 each. Yeah, okay. And because of all that posting setup with the bridge, look at the preview. Let's just change it. Okay, let me change it to today. Tip, do T, and it will give you today's date. All right. Okay, so Preview posting, I love preview posting. For all accountants out there, I would encourage you to always use preview posting before you post anything. Because, you know, sometimes, even after like 30 years of my life, knowing that teaching debits and credits, I still like to double check. So you can see here with preview posting, it has actually posted the transaction to the subledger, the supplier, the item, and the VAT subledger, but it's also, because of the posting setup, posted to the GL ledger. So as you can see, yeah, we have, it will post, obviously, like I said, it will post the net to the purchaser's account, and then the VAT to the VAT account, and then the gross to your payables account. This is standard. But remember that closing stock I was talking about? It will also post to the closing stock in the balance sheet and the closing stock in the P&L. So it's at every posted transaction, it will be posting this closing stock. Okay, so I'm going to post this now. So I'll then show you. Now, if you post receive only, it will post to the interim. And then once you've actually post invoice after the interim, it will reverse out the interim account and put it to the inventory account. Okay, but I'm going to post both receive and invoice in the interest of time. Okay. And you will see on my chart of accounts, you will see that you have your, the posting we were talking about. Yeah, it'll post to the balance sheet and to the P&L for the closing stock, and then the purchases and the VAT and the accounts payables will post there. Okay, let's go back and post the sales that I talked about. I've got a sale, so I've decided to sell it to John Lewis. 20, like I said, for £10 each. All right, so again, if we preview, so can you see it's updated the customer, subledgers, stock, and VAT again. And this time, look, it's updating the closing stock again, reversing it the other way, but, or rather not reversing it, but taking it out 20, which is at £1 each, because remember, closing stock is at cost, not at selling price. It's always at cost. And then you have your revenue, your sales, and your VAT, and your accounts receivables. So if we post this now, and again, remember, if I just post ship, it will then post to the interim account rather than to the inventory account. And this is where it'll do all the accruals for you, like we talked about, right? If you then, at a later stage, invoice, it will reverse out of the interim account and put it to the inventory account. Okay, so we're gonna do this. Just say yes, I forgot to change the date, but that's okay. All right, so we will look at, and now you can see my closing stock has gone down. Yeah, and I have my customers and my payables. Okay, and now we're gonna display the bank where you have receipts and payments. All right, so I'm going to receive money from the customer. So here, I'll say, right, now see this account type. Again, make sure you choose the right sub ledger rather than the GL account. Okay, so customer, right, good old John Lewis. And this is where I'm saying I want the other side to go to the bank account, or I can actually do 2 lines or 1 line, right? Now, because I have an invoice already, I don't fill in the amount here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, apply, because this is where you're trying to link the invoice to the payment, right? And I'm going to say, right, they're going to pay all of this. So go OK. And what this is going to do then, it's going to match the invoice to the payment so that you don't have outstanding balance. So for example, at the moment, when you go to customer, there is a 240 balance here. Now, if you don't do application, the balance will still show. Whereas what we're saying is I'm matching this payment to this invoice. And when I post this, it will then work. Yeah, it will reduce that balance to 0. So can you see it will update the customer, it will update the account, and it will then post to the correct GL account. Okay, so I'm going to post this. And as you can see, now because I've allocated it correctly, the balance is 0. Yeah. You can do the payment side as well for the vendor. Same principles. Okay, but for the interest of time, I'm going to jump to VAT on the with journals instead now. So let me right. So here we want to make sure with the VAT, you will always use the VAT posting group matrix so that Business Central will calculate the VAT. All right. And never allow users to change the VAT amounts manually. I'll show you this VAT difference setup, okay? Because, you know, with purchase invoices, when the supplier sends you an invoice, and sometimes the VAT might be 1p different, okay? If you do not allow this difference, then your user cannot change that 1p difference, all right? So if you're going to post transactions through journals and GL account, the rule here is to ensure that these 5 categories of general posting type, general business, general product, VAT, business, VAT product, against that posting GL account, they are all filled in or they are all blank. Never have them half-baked. Only have 2 of these fields, all right? If you're going to use journals, make sure that all or nothing, yeah. Don't worry because they're default settings and you can change them in the journals themselves, all right? These will determine your VAT calculation for your journal. Okay, so let's look at journals. So if I'm going to use general journals to post, for example, okay. Now, the other thing for those of you who are very new to Business Central, I always encourage you to create a new batch with your own name or the user's name. All right. Okay. And the reason is because if everybody just use default, because this is real time, can you imagine 5 users all using the same batch? yeah, and then when they're trying to all post at the same time, you're using the same page, same batch, and because this is real time, yeah, Business Central will kind of go, we're in conflict. So that's why I always encourage people to create their own batch name in the journals for each journal. Doesn't just have to be general, right? So if I want to post GL to GL, for example, all right, for whatever reason, maybe because I don't use the fixed assets, right? And I just want to, I don't use the fixed asset module in BC, and I just want to do the posting. God knows why, but let's just assume. All right. So can you see I've enabled direct posting? Okay. So let's say goodwill acquired. All right. Notice all this here. All right. So assets and asset is a debit. So let's say debit will be a positive. Where do I credit? Okay. Well, I can credit the reserve account. Let's just put it to reserve. And if it is a credit, I'll put a minus to show credit. Wrong. Minus. Too many zeros now. Oh, gosh. Admin and her zeros. Right. Notice this VAT is 0. Obviously, because they're to two balance sheet account, it should be exempt. All right. Say I want to create another one that's to say, let's just say, I don't know, let's say miscellaneous. Okay. And this time, this is an expense account. I'll debit 300. On the other side, I'm going to do it to the bank account. Remember, yeah, if it's money, if I'm using a bank, don't use a GL, change it to, if it's referring to a subledger, always use the correct type. Okay. And here, I'm going to put money going out, 300. Notice here now, there's a standard. Say this miscellaneous should be 0. Right? I can then change the VAT product posting group here to 0. All right. Okay. You see? Now, and then I can, sorry, I'll come back. And with the bank account, I've left them blank. Yeah. So when you're looking at posting now, I've still made sure that with the second one, it's gone to the bank, and all 3 will go to the VAT subledger. And here it will post to the accounts I wanted. Okay. And then I can post this. Post this. Okay, happy days. Now, with the VAT, I think there's a VAT, with the VAT setup of allow, this is on the general ledger setup, okay? And here, this is that max VAT difference allowed. I'll put it to 10p. Most people would put it to like 5p because, you know, because of rounding differences. But let's put it to 10p, okay? And this then allow when you're creating a journal, right, with VAT, it will allow you to change that VAT amount up to 10p only, all right? Ideally, it should be using these posting setup and posting groups and posting setup to work out your full VAT, the correct VAT, but any slight 1p, 2p or whatever, you can then deal with here. So same with like the purchase, and it usually involves purchase invoices, you know. So it's a little bit slow, but on here with the VAT, it will calculate, right? So if I say, and might be 0 at the moment, but then say I want VAT changes here, right? I can then bring in the and I'll change it here. Oh, Alibaba, sorry. Alibaba was foreign, wasn't it? Wrong. Should use Microsoft. And that's why it came out 0. Microsoft was domestic. So then if we look at this, it should. Okay. So can you see it work out that 20 and it's grayed out? But say for whatever reason, I shouldn't have made it so round, should I? You want to change it. I think there's a statistics here. Yes, on the statistics, then on the VAT, you can then change the VAT amount to say, and because I allowed 10p difference, okay, then it allows me to change it to 19.99, but up to 10p difference only. Okay, if I try and change it to more than 10p, it will go all right. So far, so good. Right. Let's me so go back to the whole slide then. I think that's really it. So any questions? And here's my contact details, which I'll post into the chat in a minute. Okay. So let me stop sharing.
Thank you, Adeline. Well, round of applause for Adeline, guys. I think you all agree that this session alone has provided a lot of value in resolving a lot of your common day-to-day issues. Who believes that? Round of applause, everyone, to Adeline for sharing such important information for every single person involved in Business Central. So thank you once again, Adeline. There are a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
At the same time, I understand you're a very busy person as well. You've got lots of customers to maintain. So Adeline, I'll probably say just if you would like to take a pick off the top 3 questions and feel free to answer them, that'll be really grateful.
Okay, so can we have Adeline's slide? Well, that yes, you can have my slide, but I'll have to talk to Raz about how we're gonna distribute that. Yeah.
Sure, definitely. Yes, we will be sharing that.
So can you tell us how to set up a VAT group like 20% and 5% and assign them to the document together in one document? Oh, okay, yes, that's easy. You mean when it comes to the lines? Because don't forget, the percentage is on lines, right? So if I go back, I don't know why I've closed my BC session. I shouldn't have. So no, I'll go back to, right. So here, if I go to the purchase order, for example, and you have more than one line. Am I sharing my screen? By the
Yes,
way?
you are. Yes, you
Okay,
can.
cool.
Yeah.
So say, for example, let's use Microsoft. It's easier. Okay. I haven't set up many items for this, right? So I'll just use the same items. But remember that VAT product posting group, right? Okay. So at standard, it will work out 20%. But I use the same item, F8. Okay. And this time, I change it to reduce. Notice it works out the 5% for me. And this is all from that VAT posting setup. Because I've said all these, the VAT business is from the vendor or customer. The product is always on the item. So even though I've got the same item as I showed you, Microsoft was domestic. The item set up as a default was standard. It calculated the 20. And then domestic reduced for the second line. I changed the VAT product. It worked out to under 5% instead. Yeah, okay. So does that help answer the question?
Thank you, Adeline. Yes.
Next question is the direct cost applied. Now, remember, going back to we're talking about closing stock. All right, closing stock is an accounting in its own right at year end. Yes. And if you remember, I said to you, in the past, anyone not using Business Central, you have to manually post closing stock at year end, right? Where you do debit closing stock in the balance sheet and then credit closing stock in the P&L. But in BC, it does it all for you. So in the balance sheet side, it will look at the inventory posting setup, right? So it will stop going in and out, will be using this account, all right? But when you debit something, you're going to credit somewhere else, right? And vice versa. So the other side of it, it's looking at the general posting setup, and it's looking at these columns. This one, the COGS and the direct costs. So these are for closing stock, these two, with sales for COGS and purchases for direct cost applied. The COGS interim is when you post your sales ship but not invoice yet. The inventory accrual account is you post your receipt but not invoiced for closing stock. So basically it's doing the accruals for you as well. Okay.
Thank you, Adeline. We may have time for one or two more questions.
So he says, can you name a book that can get someone well grounded on finance module of Business Central aside Microsoft? Well, the problem is, you need to be grounded in accounting to start with. Yeah. Once you're grounded in accounting, then you can then kind of associate your accounting understanding to Business Central. So best to start off with getting grounded in accounting first. And if you're in the UK, I would suggest kind of looking at AAT for like basic accounting, just to learn debits and credits, even just one course of that. Yeah, you don't have to sign up for the whole and take all the exams, obviously. But AAT is a really good grounding in terms of teaching you debits and credits. I cannot say for other countries, but there are also books in accounting. Yeah. Any other questions?
So are there any other questions, guys? I think we've gone through most of the questions now. Have we missed anything? I think Ranjit, did we answer your question? I think Ranjit's asked a couple of questions. One was in relation to direct cost applied account. Is it for
which
any
I
costs?
explained earlier.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
explained on what, but was this? How to allow
Oh.
3 decimal, but that was answered, isn't it? On the general ledger setup. Yeah.
Excellent. Yep. So we've answered all the questions. Wow. So once again, thank you, Adeline. You've actually been so helpful today, answering people's questions. Great pleasure. Hopefully we'll see you next time in person. You're a great asset to the Business Central community. Great to also have you here in the UK. So once again, everyone, round of applause for Adeline.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. And I'll put my contact details in here in a minute. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Adeline. Excellent. So now, before we move on to the next session, we have prize winners. So for the people who took part in that competition of sharing the